Hey everybody, just a quick program note that I am the guest on this week's Smashing Security podcast, hosted by Graham Cluley and Carol Theriault. Do check it out. It is a good time. That's the Smashing Security podcast. Fancy Bear has its very own rootkit. VPNFilter turns out to do a lot more than previously suspected. One of the Salisbury assassins is identified as a GRU kernel. A voice recorder app is kicked out of Google Play for being a banking Trojan. Apple's Device Enrollment Program may have authentication issues. Big Tech might learn to like being regulated. And farewell to one of Bletchley Park's Jenny Wrens. Time to tell you about our sponsor, Recorded Future. If you haven't already done so, take a look at Recorded Future's Cyber Daily. We look at it. The CyberWire staff subscribes and consults it daily. The web is rich with indicators and warnings, but it's nearly impossible to collect them by eyeballing the internet yourself, no matter how many analysts you might have on staff, and we're betting that however many you haven't got enough. Recorded Future does the hard work for you by automatically collecting and organizing the entire web to identify new vulnerabilities and emerging threat indicators. Sign up for the Cyber Daily email to get the top trending technical indicators crossing the web. Cyber news, targeted industries, threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, malware, suspicious IP addresses, and much more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of the cyber attacks. Go to recordedfuture.com/intel to subscribe for free threat intelligence updates from Recorded Future. That's recordedfuture.com/intel. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. Major funding for the CyberWire podcast is provided by Cylance. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, September 27th, 2018. There are a few Fancy Bear sightings to report today. You'll recall that Fancy Bear is what Russia's GRU has come to be called when it operates in cyberspace. Or, if you insist, Mr. Putin, Russia's GU, since, there's strictly speaking no such thing as the GRU because its name got changed, and anyway, it doesn't exist. We say phooey. Whatever the acronym, it's the same old firm, and we doubt the misdirection works even at the UN. So tell it to Turtle Bay, or save it for a meteor shower over Chelyabinsk, but no one here is buying. Security firm ESET, the gang from Bratislava, reported yesterday that Fancy Bear is deploying a rootkit against its foreign targets. They're active so far mostly in the Balkans and other Central and Eastern European countries, and the kit they've deployed is LoJax, malware developed from the LoJack anti-theft software. The attribution to Fancy Bear is, as is usually the case, circumstantial but compelling, based on the presence of other known Fancy Bear hacking tools. Cisco's Talos unit looked into VPNFilter malware and has discovered that it's even more capable than initially believed. The researchers found 7 additional modules in VPNFilter. They think it was designed to debut against Ukrainian targets on the anniversary of the NotPetya attacks, but they also note that VPNFilter was also designed to be a long-term attack platform. The malware is particularly adapted for IoT attacks, especially against vulnerable routers. When Talos started checking on VPNFilter this spring, it was hitting home routers, mostly those manufactured by MikroTik. At the time, the US FBI attributed the campaign to Fancy Bear, took control of some of its command and control infrastructure, and advised everyone to reboot their routers. It's difficult to say how many devices remain vulnerable, but VPNFilter turns out to be more capable than hitherto believed. The 7 new modules include an HTTP traffic redirection and inspection tool, an SSH utility, some network mapping functionality, a denial of service tool, a network traffic forwarding unit, a SOCKS 5 proxy, and a reverse TCP VPN. So it does a lot. And one of the suspects in the Salisbury nerve agent attacks has been identified as a GRU kernel. Both of the men British authorities hold responsible for the nerve agent attack in Salisbury have so far been known by their pseudonyms, Ruslan Bosharov and Alexander Petrov. Bosharov turns out to be one GRU colonel, Anatoly Chepiga, an officer thrice deployed to Chechnya during 17 years' service as a Spetsnaz goon. He was also awarded the Order Hero of the Russian Federation in 2014 by decree from the Russian president for peacekeeping, which probably means hybrid warfare against Ukraine. The investigative site Bellingcat, which did much of the inquisitorial heavy lifting here, says that Chepiga's alma mater, the Far Eastern Military Command School, has his name in the award up on their wall of honor. His mention is to the right of their statue of Marshal Rokossovsky. It's worth noting that the honorific Hero of the Russian Federation is by custom awarded personally by the Russian president, the way the U.S. Medal of Honor is normally presented by the U.S. president. This would seem to deprive President Putin of some deniability he's hitherto claimed. Fact is, he probably pinned the medal on Chepiga personally. Chepiga's fellow tourist, Alexander Petrov, has yet to be identified. We live in a world with Twitter bots, fake and stolen Facebook profiles, and even automated AI-driven customer service chatbots. As the technology matures, it's getting hard to be sure you're dealing with a real human being. This notion of synthetic identities is cause for concern and attention. Daniel Riedel is CEO of data security firm New Context, and he offers these thoughts.
I think with synthetic identities, it depends on the industry that you're in to a certain extent. I think the banking industry has their concept of what synthetic identities are. I think other industries do as well. Obviously, with the banking industry, it has to do with sort of fraudulent uses of payment systems. But I think that synthetic identities is going to grow and morph in ways that in some cases we can't foresee. It's sort of the unknown concept, but I think it's going to have a huge effect on how we trust an entity that we have not seen in person, basically, right? So anything where we can't absolutely validate that it is a human that I'm actually talking to.
And from your point of view today, where we stand, I mean, how do you define it in the present context?
So today, I think that you could say that some of the Twitter bots that are out there are synthetic identities. I think that I would look to see a little bit more sophistication. So LinkedIn accounts that are false but look absolutely real, like you can't tell the difference, but they are fake, or a Facebook account that is fake, or sort of what we're seeing now, especially with some of the announcements with Google, a conversation that if you cannot perceive that there's not a human on the other side, like it's a bot that's talking to you, and you cannot make the distinction of whether that's a human or a bot. I think that's really the fit for where synthetic identity is. A lot of those Twitter bots, you can absolutely it's a bot. You can see it's a bot. It's when it's very hard for your average person to make the distinction between is this a bot or is this a human? I don't know. I can't tell.
Yeah, and I think we've seen cases of this with things like romance scams, where people have, sort of vacuumed up someone else's online profile and somewhere like Facebook, and assumes their identity and uses it to scam unwitting people.
Absolutely, and I think you're going to see. So there's the age-old fraud that we've seen since the dawn of email, where somebody wants you to wire $10,000 suddenly because they're in a bad spot in the middle of Africa. The synthetic identity allows it to be a little more challenging to really understand whether that's real or not. And so I think with anything, especially when it comes to financial transactions, it's always making sure that you really know the other party before you do anything.
Yeah, I think of the example that we've seen in the past few months where, Google had a technology demonstration where they showed, an artificial intelligence that was ordering up a haircut appointment for someone. And so I think, certainly the possibility is there. You can look forward and see how that could be a useful application of this sort of thing. And yet I feel like folks, there's that uncanny valley problem. I think we just can't help having a sense that at a certain level, sometimes these things are just a little creepy.
Yeah, it's like a Black Mirror episode. It's you're kind of in this new world that we weren't quite sure, where if I picked up the phone and I had a conversation with somebody, I'm almost positive that's a human being. We're going to go into a world where that may not be the case anymore, especially if you extrapolate out. And so the question is, from sort of a policy perspective, are we going to have policy where if a customer support calls up and it's a very well-written AI that you can have a conversation with, should it say, "Hi, I am actually not a real person, but I'm here to help you"? And therefore, those folks who don't do that, it's a little easier to compartmentalize and possibly make it so law enforcement can go after them. I don't know, quite where that's going to go. Regulation isn't necessarily always the best way to approach something, but I think, those organizations that put their best foot forward and think about that before anyone on the regulation side thinks about that, I think that would be a good thing.
That's Daniel Riedel from New Context. Returning to some other ESET research, the company says it found a banking Trojan masquerading as a call recording app in Google's Play Store. The bad app was called QRecorder. Google has given it the heave-ho. Duo Security reports finding an authentication weakness in Apple's Device Enrollment Program that could be exploited for privilege escalation or rogue device deployment. Part of the problem is that a device serial number, and that's a predictable number according to Duo, it can be used to enroll a device. Duo recommends that enterprises protect themselves by requiring user authentication before mobile device management enrollment. They notified Apple of what they found, but Apple has yet to address the matter. It thus falls into that familiar, that's a known issue category. Yesterday's hearings in the U.S. Senate covered online privacy. Big Tech expressed general approval of privacy regulations. Some of the GDPR's requirements are onerous, but Big Tech likes consistency and predictability. So while in some ways regulation isn't really welcome, it does have some upsides for those who fall under it. Privacy laws and possible antitrust actions continue to loom over Silicon Valley. Finally, it's worth remembering our heroes, and one such received a last farewell Monday. Jean Briggs Waters, who died last week at the age of 92, was laid to rest at the Omaha National Cemetery. She was buried with a Union Jack over her casket and honors from Her Majesty's government. Miss Briggs was one of the last surviving Bletchley Park bomb operators who ran the code-breaking machines that yielded up German signals during the Second World War. She enlisted in the Wrens, the Women's Royal Naval Service, at the age of 18 out of an art school in Cambridge. During the war, she fell in love with an American Army Air Force pilot, John Waters. They married, and after the war, settled in Nebraska. Mr. Waters died in June at the age of 101, and this week, Jean was laid beside him. Thank you, Miss Briggs, and may you rest in peace. Now a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Observit. It's 2018. Traditional data loss prevention tools aren't cutting it anymore. They're too difficult to deploy, too time-consuming to maintain, and too heavy on the endpoint. They are high maintenance and require endless fine-tuning. It's time to take a more modern approach. With Observit, you can detect insider threats, investigate incidents quickly, and prevent data loss. With its lightweight agent and out-of-the-box insider threat library, Observit is quick to deploy and far more effective at stopping data from leaving your organization. That's because Observit focuses on user behavior. It's built to detect and respond to insider threats, and it's extremely difficult even for the most technical users to bypass. Bring your data loss prevention strategy into the modern era with Observit. Learn more at observit.com/cyberwire. That's observit.com/cyberwire. And we thank Observit for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Mike Benjamin. He's the Senior Director of Threat Research at CenturyLink. Mike, welcome back. We've seen plenty of stories come by about Spectre, Meltdown, and most recently Foreshadow. And there's been a lot of teeth gnashing and hand-wringing over that. But you wanted to make the point today that maybe it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, I mean, any bug that hits our industry or puts anybody at risk it's of course interesting, and people need to understand it. They need to patch it or mitigate it, as the case may be. But if we look at the class of bugs, these are really very difficult to exploit when you compare to what we were looking at 10, 20 years ago, right? Gone are the days of a simple buffer overflow in a privileged application on an internet-facing service. The fact that we're getting into this complexity of chips really shows how much we've matured as an industry. So I actually think it's a good opportunity to step back, look at it, and be proud what we've been able to accomplish in terms of maturity to technology and software, and look at these bugs as not all a bad thing.
What do you say to the folks who make the case that this is a result of the chip makers not being able to increase clock speeds fast enough, that market pressure still means that they wanted to do things faster, so they went back to the computer science books and they came up with these, they dug out these speculative processing routines, and without maybe giving it the closer look that it deserved?
Well, I think that's a little unfair. You can look at any technology advancement we've made in any area and probably point to some security issue that came out of it. And so this is part of evolving technology, right? And so academia has brought us some interesting methodologies in order to receive increased execution speed. And I don't think we should criticize necessarily everything they do. On the flip side, from a chip manufacturer perspective, this is a great opportunity to learn from the experience and think about how to properly vet these technologies in the future. So it's a maturity item, and the pendulum will swing both ways. We're going to have advancements, we're going to learn from them, and then hopefully we mature to the point where things like the class of bug that gets provided by speculative execution really is no longer going to be an issue after we learn from it in future spins of this technology.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, here in the real world, for folks who have to deal with this, should they be worried? What's an appropriate level of concern people should have with this?
Well, my recommendation to everyone that's asked me has been be aware of what it is. And so the concept of retrieving information through these bugs is a risk to certain organizations and certain environments. And of course, the environments that get mentioned most from the publicity that these bugs receive is always the shared multi-tenant cloud environments. The infrastructure as a service provider environments is where other people's data is running on the same chip. It's being stored in the same system. And that's where the risk is. And so reaching out to the service providers that offer those technologies, ensuring that they've patch their environments or mitigated in an appropriate way so that you're not at risk is an appropriate reaction. From other cases, either the data being stored is not as at high of risk, or they're in their own private environments where they need to be aware more of other security issues in front of this and need to allow the natural patching cycle to occur inside their company.
Mike Benjamin, thanks for joining us. And that's the Cyberwire. For links to all the stories mentioned in today's podcast, check out our daily news brief at thecyberwire.com. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the Cyberwire possible, especially to our sustaining sponsor, Cylance. To find out how Cylance can help protect you using artificial intelligence, visit Cylance.com. And Cylance is not just a sponsor, we actually use their products to help protect our systems here at the Cyberwire. And thanks to our supporting sponsor, VMware, creators of Workspace ONE Intelligence. Learn more at vmware.com. The Cyberwire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our Cyberwire editor is John Petrick, social media editor Jennifer Iben, technical editor Chris Russell, executive editor Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.